back to Cinema Wellman. I am your host, David. And today, we're going to finish the Cinema Wellman Origin Story. Because as soon as I posted the other episode, I started thinking to myself, well, how could I not have mentioned that? I forgot to mention that. I forgot to mention this. So this is going to be a short and sweet episode that's going to kind of wrap up the entire origin story of Cinema Wellman. And I'm going to start with, I mentioned that my exposure to foreign film began at BU, and I forgot to mention that, well, it didn't. Not that I was lying to anybody, but I forgot that I was exposed to foreign film when I was really young, at the age of maybe 8, 9, definitely 10 and 11, because it was a show on CBS on Saturday mornings called the CBS Children's Film Festival. And the hosts were Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. So Fran was a woman, and Kukla and Ollie were puppets. And I don't like puppets, but Fran was okay. I trusted Fran. In any event, Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, after my many hours of cartoon watching on Saturday mornings, at 1 o'clock on Saturdays on CBS, I got the CBS Children's Film Festival. Now, it began in 1967, but there's no way I'm watching it in 67. I did some research, and I found out that starting in 1971, because it used to be they only did it in February and March for several years. And then they decided to do it every Saturday afternoon. And that's when I got involved. I'm thinking that probably 1971, 1972 is when I started doing this. And what they did was they took foreign films in which there were young protagonists, and they made that into a little show that exposed me to films from all over the world with, again, very importantly, kids as the protagonists. These are kids movies from other countries. And I'm not talking about kids movies as far as animated movies or anything like that. I'm talking about films in which people my age at the time were the protagonists. And I got to see films from faraway places like Bulgaria and Ceylon, Czechoslovakia, Soviet Union, Bulgaria, and stuff from France and Italy and Great Britain. And I've watched a lot of stuff from that as an adult. But being exposed to those countries, their kids' movies, was very, very interesting. I found, of course, everything's available on the interwebs these days, and I did find a comprehensive list of all the films that were shown on the CBS Children's Film Festival. And as an adult, I'm really impressed at what they were showing, because there were a lot of films that, there were several Academy Award nominated films that I saw, not knowing it at the time, but Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, it was fantastic. It was a trip around the world every Saturday at 1 o'clock. And again, I got exposed to cinema from all over the world, and it made me more willing to accept international cinema, I guess. I know there are people that just don't want to watch foreign films, but you are missing, if you're one of those people, you are missing so much that's out there that would be enjoyable and important to you as a film goer. You got to embrace international cinema. You just have to. One of the other things I forgot, I did mention the drive-in, but I only mentioned going to the drive-in to get sauced with Don and Andrew and the grab bag cooler and all that stuff. but I neglected to mention that I went many times to the drive-in with my parents and my sister. And these little visits, we didn't go all the time, but we went enough. We went a good amount of times, and the vehicle that I associate with these drive-in visits with my parents is our, I don't know what it was, a Chevy. I think it was a Chevy. It was a blue station wagon. And younger people listening might have no idea what a station wagon actually is. But I got to tell you, those memories in that blue station wagon going to drive-ins with Gene and Ray and Vanessa are just tremendous. What made it special? I remember taking a bath and putting on my pajamas before it was dark, and then going to the drive-in. And Gene, of course, there was a cooler, not a grab bag cooler for beers, of course, but she had a cooler with treats and food for all of us, but especially for Vanessa and myself if we got bored or restless along the way. So we'd pull into the drive-in and go over the bumps, the bumps. People that haven't been to drive-ins don't know what I'm talking about, but those bumps. And then we'd settle in, and we'd before they started broadcasting the movies via the radio, we had to take the little speaker and hook it onto Ray's partially opened window just to put it in there, hang it in there, had the volume, and it was amazing. And I remember when it got close to darkness, people would always start honking their horns as if that was going to speed on nature. Come on, Mother Nature, make that sun go down earlier so we can watch this movie. We would always, Ray is not beeping that horn. And we would always try to goad him into it. Dad, everybody else is beeping more. Beep the horn. It's not going to make any difference. It doesn't matter. Let's get involved. Let's go. And he didn't do it. Every once in a while, he'd give a cursory, and he'd kind of have this smile on his face that was so hey at the time. Fantastic. And a specific memorable drive-in experience with my parents and my sister was when we went to see Patton. And Patton is a war movie about General George S. Patton. It's a biopic, and George C. Scott plays Patton. And we got there. This is 1970. I'm 8 years old. Vanessa's 10, and Ray, Gene had nothing to do with this. Ray took us to see Patton, and we got there late, and we ended up being in the very back row of the drive-in. And my memory has it that we parked under a weeping willow tree, and the weeping willows were actually touching and obscuring part of our windshield at the time. And I don't know if you've ever seen Patton, but it was rated PG, but there's a lot of profanity in it. And it's not major league profanity. There's single A, double A, and triple A and major league profanity. This was double A at best. But with an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old in the back seat, every shit, every son of a bitch was greeted with a sideways glance from my mother to my father. And he would just shake his head. It was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. The best part of every drive-in that I went to with my parents was pretending that I'd be asleep on the way home. And I remember this vividly. I would lay down in the back seat of that blue Chevy station wagon, and my eyes half open, seeing the street lights go by, We just had a couple of movies. We just had some snacks and everything, hanging out with the family. And when we pulled down that driveway, even though I was awake, I was asleep because the goal was to have Ray just scoop me up and carry me to my bedroom. It was amazing. It was amazing. Making believe you were asleep so your dad can carry you to bed. All good. That's that's the drive-in before the grab bag cooler was introduced. All right, next. For what it's worth, I have finished every movie that I've ever started. The only movie that I talk to people and all the time they say, I watched 10 minutes of that, I shut it off. Or I went to the theater and I walked out. And I always laugh at that. I respect that. Good for you. You do what you need to do. If it's terrible, leave. I have a problem with that. And as a matter of fact, the only film in the theater that I ever walked out of was it's not something really bad like, what can I think of off the top of my head? Tattoo. It wasn't Tattoo. It was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And the only reason I got up and left was, I don't know, 45 minutes into the movie, Lisa nudged me and said, I'm hungry. Do you want ribs? And I immediately got up because I wanted ribs more than I wanted to see these kids brought back to normal size. I was not interested in that. Now, the point is, later on, I rented Honey, I Shrunk the Kids because I needed to watch the rest of it. Or at least I felt I needed to. Student once loaned me the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And one of the great things about being a teacher was, and talking about movies, is that kids want to talk movies with you. And I was always all into that. And I told kids, if you have a movie that you think I should see that I haven't seen, bring it in. I'll bring it home over the weekend. I'll watch it and I'll let you know how it was. And I did this all the time. And I remember one of my kids came in one Friday with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And when I say this took me the entire 3-day weekend, I mean it took me the entire 3-day weekend. I'd watch. It's not my cup of tea. Fantasy is not my cup of tea. I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm just saying it's not one of the genres that I lean towards. So I'd watch for 45 minutes and I just shut it off. I can't do this. I can't do that. And then, 2 hours later, I'm going to watch a little bit more of this. But I mean, it was a lot. This little quirk of finishing everything that I've started as far as watching movies is known as the Glengarry rule. And it's named after the 1992 film Glengarry Glen Ross. And I rented that movie when it came out on video. So you figure back then it probably been 1993 or so. I hated it so much that I shut it off. And I returned it to the video store. About 5 years later, I rented it again. And I watched it all the way through. I didn't like it that much better, but at least I finished it. As I always say, in for a penny, in for a pound. Next, according to the interwebs, there have been a total of 581 films that have been nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture. 581. I have seen 579 of those films. The two holdouts, East Lynne from 1931 and The White Parade from 1934. Now, I don't know for a fact, but I know that I'm not the only person in the world whose Best Picture nominee Oscar watching list has stalled at 579. And there's a reason for that. And the reason being that East Lynne and The White Parade aren't available. They're nowhere. As a matter of fact, I researched and I found out that the only way to watch those is to go to the UCLA Film and TV Archive. And I haven't researched it to the point yet that I know they have them. I don't know if you can go there and watch them. So that's coming later. I'm going to research that and figure out if I go out there, will they let me watch these movies? And if they do, I am there. That's a box that I need to check. It'll be done. All right, next. Having seen almost 8,000 movies to this point, some directors are going to pop up, of course, over and over and over and over again. If you see 8,000 movies, you didn't see 8,000 movies directed by 8,000 different directors. Some of them are going to be frequent flyers. And I was curious about, which directors have I seen the most movies of theirs? And this was a COVID project, and this was something I was like, I'm going to check this out. So I did everything. I took my database and I sorted it by director, and then I looked at, well, how many of them have I seen, 10 of their movies, 10 or more. And that answer is 123. There are 123 directors out there that I've seen 10 or more of their movies. I'm like, oh, okay, we're going to rank them. There are 14 directors that I've seen 20 or more of their movies. And then there is my Mount Rushmore, my top 4. And, are these my top 4 favorite directors? Not necessarily, but they are the directors whose films I've seen the most of. That's what it is. Now, we're going to start with John Ford. John Ford's in the 3rd spot, tied for 3rd with 31 films. I think I've seen 31 John Ford films, and he is the king of the Western. That's what John Ford is associated with. And yet my favorite John Ford movie is not a Western. It's Mr. Roberts, which is so near and dear to me. That is one of my all-time favorite movies. And now that I mention it, I feel like watching it tonight. That's how much I love that movie. Also by Ford, big fan of The Searchers, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Stagecoach. As I mentioned, just the king of the Western genre in my mind. And has to be one of Ray's favorite directors because Ray zeroed in on the cinematography whenever we watch movies. And Ford shot all of his exteriors for his Westerns in Monument Valley in Arizona and Utah, and that was Ray's wheelhouse. We'd watch these movies and I'd be thinking about, the characters and the story and everything, and Ray would just go, look at that. Look how beautiful that is. And he was right. There's something to that, and cinematography was his thing. Tied for 3rd with Ford, 31 films, Steven Spielberg. And Spielberg, hands down, my favorite Spielberg film is Jaws. And there's enough Jaws stuff in my house to actually prove that point over and over. Other Spielberg films I love, and you're not going to hear the ones that you would assume, I think, but some of my favorites by Spielberg are Minority Report, Catch Me If You Can, and Duel, which was a TV movie. And Duel with Dennis Weaver is a phenomenal suspense film. And if you haven't seen it, look that one up and make sure you see that. It's kind of funny to think that one of our most revered and respected directors of all time thought he would never work again after he directed Jaws, and what a mess that whole shoot was. Directors in 2nd place for me, as far as films watched, Alfred Hitchcock. And to date, I've seen 38 of Hitchcock's films, and I've actually enjoyed an overwhelmingly large number of them. There's a lot of directors I love that have, you know, 5, 10 movies that I'm like, Hitchcock, almost all of them get the thumbs up in the database. It's really difficult for me to pick my favorite, but my two favorites, I think, are Rope and Shadow of a Doubt. And I loved that. I loved Shadow of a Doubt so much and would talk about movie fans and Hitchcock fans. And of course, they're going to reel off some of the better North by Northwest, Vertigo. Sure, all good, all good. And I'd say, I love Shadow of a Doubt. And say, I've never seen it. I said, you should see it. Later on in life, reading, researching stuff about movies, etc., I find out that Hitchcock later said that his favorite movie was Shadow of a Doubt. And I loved that. I thought that was just, I was like, Hitch, you're the best. You know your movies, I know your movies, and we are on the same wavelength. Rope is tremendous. Rope takes place in one room. It was part of the claustrophobia theme I had for one of the months when I did the themes watching my films. Also love Strangers on a Train, Rear Window, Psycho. Come on. I mean, so many classics and so many films that deserve repeated viewings. A lot of people have asked me, why? Because I don't know. There are some movies that I've seen 30 times or more. And people say, why? Because every time you watch it, if it's good, if it's quality, if it's special, you're going to notice something different. And this happens to me no matter how many times I watch Jaws, The Big Lebowski, Citizen Kane, Casablanca. I mean, I'm always noticing new things, even though I've seen it so many times. So in my opinion, you can't go wrong. If you're looking for suspense, he's the one. Hitchcock is the one. And his television series, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, that was also really good. And he introduced each little bit with this little comedic, he had this snarky, very dark sense of humor that translated to his TV show. Tippi Hedren, the actress who starred in The Birds for Hitchcock, her daughter is Melanie Griffith. And Melanie Griffith, as a child on the set of The Birds, was given as a birthday gift by Hitchcock a doll of her mother, Tippi Hedren, in a casket. So the guy was the guy was dark, no doubt about that. But I mean, his movies are amazing. I remember an interview I watched with Hitch that, like, I'm a personal friend of his, that he explained the difference between suspense and surprise. And he said, there's a bomb and it's underneath somebody's seat on a train. Surprise is the bomb blows up and everybody dies. The suspense is, you know the bomb's there, and the characters have no clue that the bomb is there. That is suspense. And he is the king of suspense. Again, you can't go wrong with his films. In first slot, actually, is Michael Curtiz, who, if you don't know him, he directed Casablanca. And I've seen 44 of his films, and at least half of those I've watched after, actually more than that, 75% of the films I watched directed by Michael Curtiz, I watched after I saw Casablanca. Because Casablanca is I don't think there's any such thing as a perfect film, but I got to tell you, Casablanca is, in my opinion, as close as you can get. And Michael Curtiz directed that, so after that, I'm all in. You directed it, I'm going to watch it. That's how it works. So Casablanca is way up there. Other Curtis favorites are Mildred Pierce, Yankee Doodle Dandy with Jimmy Cagney. And if you think Jimmy Cagney is just a gangster in his movies, you must see Yankee Doodle Dandy. The guy could sing, the guy could dance, and just phenomenal. Also, Angels with Dirty Faces, directed by Curtis. And that's Jamie Cagney again. Some of the Bowery Boys and Humphrey Bogart. Tremendous. So that's my Mount Rushmore of directors as far as number. Curtis first, Hitchcock second, and Spielberg and Ford tied for third. All right, moving on. I have 3 tattoos, and they are all movie related. And I figured I should mention this. My first was based on the film Donnie Darko. And Dakota came up with the idea about this, and that's the Donnie Darko font. And it is, in the film, Donnie Darko knows when the world is going to end and how many days, how many months, I think it's months, days, hours, and seconds before the world ends. And I love that movie so much, and I was thinking about a tattoo, and I love my daughters so much, and I wanted to have a tattoo that would have something to do with my daughters, and Dakota thought of this, and Donnie writes those numbers on his arm in this font in that film, and what I've done is I've taken the same thing, and these are my girls' birthdays. 3/3/93, 5/8/96, and I love it. And I can't tell you how many times when friends would ask, how old's Hannah now? And I do the quick math because I can't keep track of stuff like that. The second one, up here, I have the Fury Road logo from Mad Max Fury Road. That's that skull. And then the other one, my most recent one, is over here, and it is Godzilla in Japanese. And I always joke, I always tell people that when people, when we're talking about tattoos or whatever, and I'm sharing this knowledge, not information, I'm just saying, and then I have this one. And if I think they're judgy and they'll ask, well, what does that mean? What is that? Well, if they're judgy, I'll say, oh, it's Japanese for family, when it's actually Godzilla. That's, I just have a backup in case I run into some judgies. I'm already trying to figure out what the next one is, and I don't know, and it might be movie related. Who knows? And if it is, I will share that with you. Next, something I had a lot of fun with a few years ago was I created my own soundtrack for a silent movie. I had watched the 1924 film He Who Gets Slapped on TCM, and I watched it with its original soundtrack from 1924. And He Who Gets Slapped stars the great Lon Chaney, just an unbelievable actor, and he plays in this film. He plays a clown who is slapped for entertainment in front of an audience. Like I said, this is some grim business. This is a disturbing film. It's a dark film. So since clowns and circuses are involved with this, while I was watching it and listening to the music, remember, there's no dialogue. They're all on the cards, the dialogue cards. I'm listening to it, and for some reason, I thought of a Tool song. I'm a big Tool fan, and there's a Tool song from the album Anima, and it's titled Intermission, and it's a short, less than a minute song that leads into this other song of theirs, Jimmy. It's almost connected, and it's a little Calliope-ish, and while I was watching He Who Gets Slapped, it ran through my mind, I like this music, but this is so dark, this is so disturbing that I think I could do an entire Tool soundtrack for this film. So I put it together. And I was so happy with the way it came out. This might sound to you like the Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon and The Wizard of Oz, which is a famous combination. And if you're fans of either or both and you haven't done that yet, you need to do that. Do some research on the internet because there's a specific time to press play on your whatever you're dealing with, your VCR, your DVD, no VCR, your DVD or your streamer, wherever you're streaming The Wizard of Oz or watching The Wizard of Oz, there's a certain time where you press play to begin The Dark Side of the Moon, and it connects and it matches up. It matches up so well that there were rumors that Pink Floyd did it on purpose, which is preposterous. Even Pink Floyd said that. It just worked. If we didn't do it, they didn't do it. It just worked. Now, I'm not claiming that my Tool, He Who Got Slapped, works as well as Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon with Wizard of Oz, but it really matched up perfectly in a lot of places. And I shared this with my friend Andy. You know Andy. I've talked about Andy a few times. Andy composed the music for Cinema Wellman, and Andy was over and we watched it and he enjoyed it. So that was good enough for me. I liked it. Someone else liked it. So that project was worth it. And speaking of projects, there are books, and there are 10 of them, and they look like this. Each one looks like this, and this happens to be volume 5, which is from 1968 to 1977. And basically, what I did was I printed out all of the Oscar nominees and the films that they were from. And what I do is I go through and I highlight everything. And Dakota created the covers for that with her Cricut. We've got the big Oscar there, and what I did was here I did 10 of my favorite films from that era that were nominated for Academy Awards. And that's something that's ongoing, and I keep working on that. It's just something that keeps me connected to the whole movie idea. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about, really, it's funny that the guy who grew up loving movies, the guy who majored in film, the guy who has watched close to 8,000 movies, the guy who has now started a movie podcast, neglected to mention that he got to work on a movie. I got to work on a movie, and that movie was The Woundwood, and I'm wearing the t-shirt, and I'll tell you about how I got the t-shirt in a second. This opportunity came about because, again, Andy. Now, Andy's close friend, Ross, is a movie producer, and this happened last year, and it's right after I stopped teaching, and Ross was talking to Andy, and Ross was talking about an upcoming production that he was going to work on that he needed a teacher. He said, I got a minor on the film that needs to have a teacher, and I don't know what to do. And Andy said, you're all set. I got somebody for you. And he did. And it's really one of the best things I've ever taken part in. It was amazing. It's hard to explain all the feelings I had. I was like a kid in a candy store, 60 years old. And my first visit to a movie set. And I tried to tone down all the fanboy stuff. But it was amazing. I had so many questions, and I found a couple of PAs that were willing to answer a lot of those questions. Got to see everything being done, and it was great. So an unforgettable experience. I was a tutor on set, and the young man that I got to work with, his name is Hudson, and he is absolutely amazing. He's a great young man. He's a great kid, really, really good actor for his age, and I think he's only going to get better if he pursues this in life. I think he's just going to get better. He's extremely intelligent, so my job was so easy. I shouldn't have even accepted pay. It was absolutely a breeze. He's a self-starter. He's inquisitive. He wants to learn, and he's curious about everything. And he was fantastic. Now, this was The Woundwood. It's currently in post-production, and so they're trying to finish that part of it to get it out there so people can see it. And it's a horror movie that was filmed in a mansion that was scheduled to be demolished. That's the better word. Demolished and cleared, the land cleared after filming. And it's a horror movie. So we're filming in this huge mansion out in Concord that has these just vast lands that go way back. There's water all over the place. It was tremendous. Now, one of my favorite parts of this was they moved Hudson and I around a lot. I got in the morning and I checked in, and I would ask the producers, where are we now? Are we still in the living room? No, we had to move you. No, we moved you upstairs. We moved you down to this room. We moved you to that room. I think we were in 6 or 7 different places. I'm not positive, but we made the best of each one. Each place had its own pluses and minuses. Each place had its distinct charm, and it was fantastic. I really loved doing this, and I would like to do it again, but the only thing I didn't like about it was the schedule. So I had 33 straight years of my life that I went to work at a certain time and I got out of work at a certain time. That's your work day. Working on a film, forget it. We wouldn't get our call sheets until the night before the next day's shoot. And I would cross my fingers when that email came in. And if they said, David, we need you at 7 a.m. Yes. We need you at 8 a.m. Yes. David, we need you at 1 p.m. And I was like, oh, that's brutal. David, we need you at 3 p.m. Who goes to work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? That part was difficult, but it was a tremendous opportunity. And thank you, Andy, for that. And thank you, Ross, for that. And again, it's something that I would love to do again. The only thing that makes me a little leery about it is that I'm kind of positive that I'm not going to end up with another student like Hudson and another parent. His mom, Donna, fantastic. She was wonderful, and working with the two of them for 2 months was tremendous. So again, I'd love to do that again. I'd love to be a tutor on a movie set. But I'd rather do it with Hudson and rather do it with Donna than do it with anybody else. And that's about it. Now that should be it. I tried to lay down everything, how the tracks went, those little step, this step, that step, this step. That's everything that's led me to my current place, which is writing a movie blog and hosting a podcast about movies. And everything I've mentioned in these last 2 episodes has led me to this point, and I am very glad that you're here along with me. Coming up on the next Cinema Wellman podcast, we're going to do the September screenings, top 10, bottom 5. Then we're going to do Beginner's Guide to Cult Movies. And after that, we're going to do the Halloween week episode is going to be the Stephen King adaptations, top 10, bottom 5. And this week, I watched my 41st Stephen King adapted film, so there's a lot to choose from. Thank you for listening and watching. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. It's at Cinema Wellman. Listen here on Spotify. Watch here on YouTube. All you need to do to find us there is search Cinema Wellman. And if you have email us. You've got questions, you've got comments, you've got suggestions for upcoming episodes. I am all ears. Email us at cinemawellman@gmail.com. That's it for this episode. It wasn't as short as I thought it was going to be. My apologies for that. And until next time, take care.